Hi, everybody. This is going to be our lecture for the chapter on psychological skills training, and it's just an introductory chapter. We're going to probably get about halfway through that chapter, and then we'll pick up with the end of this lecture when I return from my trip from the conference in Indianapolis. I just wanted to briefly remind you, I have not corrected your exams yet. I'm working on both those and your research proposal introductions, and I'll have those back for you the day that I get back. I also wanted to remind you that we moved the due date for the revision draft, which is going to be due on the 27th of October, I believe, so we moved it back a full week. So keep that in mind. I'll get you some feedback, and then you'll have about a week to revise it and get it returned back to me for the revision. All right, so I'm going to share my slides with you so you can take a look at these. Let's see if I can do this. Give me just a second. Okay. All right. So I really wanted to encourage you to work hard in this chapter to put together what you read in the textbook and also the things that we're learning in the lectures. So this will help with your next exams a little bit more. It'll help to really get you focused on what to learn. And I think that adding the text content, also offers a lot more depth to the things that you're learning. There's way too much information for us to get through in class. So it's extremely important that you're reading and you're adding that depth to what you're learning. So psychological skills training, what do we mean by that? We mean that there are some skills that you can learn just like you would learn any other skill, whether it be a physical skill, so like learning how to dribble a basketball or a soccer ball, learning how to hit a tennis ball, learning how to pole vault. All of those different skills are something that you learn. And I want you to think about and kind of carefully consider what exactly it takes for you to learn a skill and to learn it well. And when we talk about psychological skills, we're talking about some of these mental skills that athletes will benefit from as they go throughout their experience in competition. So here's kind of where we're headed. We're going to first talk about what psychological skills training is and why it's important. We'll talk about why more people don't use psychological skills training. Why are they sometimes neglected? And then I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some myths that are common when you're thinking about psychological skills training. We'll also get into a bit more about how to implement some of these psychological skills training in a program, and designing a psychological skills program. We'll touch on that just briefly. And then at the very end, we'll do a little bit of troubleshooting. We'll talk about some of the problems that you might face if you were to try to implement this from a sports psychology consultant viewpoint, or even from a coaching standpoint, and perhaps even from an athlete standpoint. So pick any one of these, or maybe several of these athletes that you see pictured here. And they are some of the top athletes in their field, or maybe were at one time. So we see Serena Williams, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady. Up in the top left-hand corner is Inbee Park, and she is one of the top female golfers in the world. LeBron James, um, Misty Phillips, I think or Misty Franklin, sorry, is the swimmer down there at the bottom, and Tiger Woods, of course. And at one point or another, each of these athletes were at the top of their game. And we see a lot of athletes who are very talented. If you get to the professional level, you have to have a certain skill set physically. But sometimes we see athletes that are able to do these amazing performances, but it only lasts for one game or a short period of time. And then they seem to kind of fall back into a slump or just not playing at such a high level. The athletes that you see pictured here are people who have consistently performed at a very high level, at least for a stretch of their career. I'm thinking of Tiger Woods right now. He's not doing really great. But at one point, he was consistently the best golfer in the world. And so think about what sets these athletes apart. What psychological skills do you think these athletes have to use in order to really get that edge to get above and beyond the rest of their competition? So as you think about that, let's get into some definitions and some of the content of the chapter, and we'll hopefully try and relate these things back to what we're talking about. So psychological skills training is this idea of systematic and consistent practice of mental or psychological skills for the purpose of enhancing performance, increasing enjoyment, or achieving greater self-satisfaction. So for the most part, you're going to see athletes who want to get into psychological skills training, sometimes called mental skills training, because they want to gain an edge and they want to enhance performance. But oftentimes we might see athletes that just want to increase their enjoyment, and part of the joy of the game might be doing a skill well or competing well. It might be this idea of just achieving greater self-satisfaction. So it's oftentimes connected to competition and just having better performances, but it's also something that can bring a lot of joy and self-fulfillment. I also wanted to point out to you that there is these words systematic and consistent are incredibly important. So if we go back to the beginning when I talked about what a psychological skills training program might be, I talked about making it kind of liken it or make it similar to how you would learn any type of a physical skill. So it might be that you're learning how to juggle. It might be that you're learning how to swim the backstroke. It might be that you're learning any type of physical skill. We know by experience, we've all had to learn something brand new, that it takes consistent practice. So you have to continually be doing the skill, repetition over and over and over. One of the challenges that we see in sport and exercise psychology as we work with athletes is that there is sometimes the misconception that if you just go see a sports psychology consultant for one time, then they're going to have all the answers to your problems. But in reality, it's more something that takes practice. It takes consistency. You have to really buckle down and learn it like you would any other skill. Systematic pretty much means there's an order to what you're doing. So we'll talk a little bit about what that order means. It means essentially you can't learn how to do calculus before you've learned algebra. So you have to learn the basics and then you build on that. And it also gets at, again, at the idea of consistency. A lot of times people think about mental skills training as a way to build mental toughness. And I think that this term has often been misused or overused. My thesis as a master's student was on mental toughness. And I got sucked into this idea of, well, mental toughness is this amazing quality, and it is, but I think that there's a lot of issues surrounding it because um, there are many definitions of mental toughness, not just by the media, but also by um, researchers, many different definitions. And so until we can kind of gain um, a specific definition and content, then it becomes really tricky to try and unravel what mental toughness is, essentially. Um, if you combine all of the definitions, you might come up with something like this. Mental toughness is an athlete's ability to focus, rebound from failure, cope with pressure, and persist in the face of adversity. It's a form of mental resilience. Mental toughness, you hear that phrase all the time. Um, for me, it evokes pictures or situations of maybe a time when I had to really just grind it out. It was hard. It was something that I was trying to rebound from, maybe a specific instance of failure. So you can really, one of the biggest things about mental toughness is recognizing that there is adversity and that sometimes things are not going to go according to plan, and you have to stay on task mentally, psychologically, in order to move past those kind of dips in your performance or slumps in your performance. So I want you to try and think of some examples of people who are very mentally tough. For you, it doesn't have to be in sport. It could be in any area of life. It could be in any profession. But can you think of good examples of people who exhibit this quality of mental toughness? If we were in class and we'd talk about some of your examples, but I think that anytime you can make a connection with someone in real life, with a real person that you know, and connect that idea of mental toughness, and if you can articulate why they are mentally tough, that's going to help you learn the term better and learn any type of content better. So if you can connect it to real life, that's great. Another portion of this idea of mental toughness is the idea that these athletes have a high sense of self-belief and an unshakable faith that they can control their own destiny. So they have really high confidence, that's the self-belief, and they also have this idea of unshakable faith that they control what comes of their performance. So we talked about attribution theory and being able to understand what it is that we attribute our failures and our successes to. And one of those components is control. So when we feel like we are unable to control what's going on in our lives, then we feel somewhat helpless and we're unable to form an action plan. In sports, it's the same thing. If you feel like you can't control what's going to happen to you, then you might give up and might not try to form some type of a plan to overcome that. So this idea of control is really important. People who are mentally tough feel like they can control their own destiny. They feel like they are able to really be the masters of their own fate. And they also remain relatively unaffected by competition or adversity. So no matter whether they're participating in a competition, what level, what kind of pressure they feel, what kind of adversity they feel, they're relatively unaffected. They go about their skill or their performance in the same way. So this really gets at the idea of, let's say you're on a basketball team and you're going to be performing in an arena that's unfamiliar to you. One of the keys of mental toughness is being able to go through your routine the same way that you would without having those outside or external factors affect who you are and what you're doing. So I wanted to give you a little bit of some of the components according to some of the research that's been done. Jones and colleagues talked about mental toughness as having a motivational component, talked about dealing with pressure, confidence, and being able to concentrate in situations that are difficult. They talk about how mental toughness is used before competition. So it might be used in goal setting, any type of discipline that you need to grind out practice to improve your skill, to do the same thing every day, to really hone those skills or fine tune those skills. That takes a lot of mental toughness. They also talk about how mental toughness is important during, obviously, coping with pressure. And that's where we primarily hear the word mental toughness, where we hear it come from, is during competition. And then it's also used after competition. And this is usually in response to some kind of failure or adversity that the athlete is feeling. We're going to go with this 4C model of mental toughness that the book adopts. And I like that they make it easy for you to remember the 4 C's. So control is that idea of being able to feel as if you're the master of your own fate and that you can control your own destiny. Commitment is the idea of really just grinding things out, taking an active role in preparation and during events or competitions, just really being committed and not just kind of falling apart when things go wrong. Challenge is basically a matter of perspective. So seeing any type of a change, whether it be in competition or outside of competition, as an opportunity to grow and to develop rather than as a threat. So it really is just that perception and the type of mindset that you have. Confidence is just pretty straightforward, this strong sense of self-belief. So these 4 C's are how we're going to define and how we are going to understand mental toughness. All right, before we go on, I just want to double check that we're still recording so I don't chat for so long. And okay, great. Looks like we're still going. Go back to that. Okay. Okay. So why is psychological skills training so important? When athletes were kind of asked about this in a setting of research, then they found that athletes felt that psychological factors primarily accounted for some of their day-to-day fluctuations in performance. So the factors that influence you regularly, whether you have a bad day or whether you don't have a bad day, athletes recognize that it's a lot of times attributable to psychological factors. And they found that what really determined how they were performing from day to day, and whether they had one day that was awesome and the next day was maybe not so great and then the third day was awesome again, was purely based on their psychological factors. However, we see something kind of crazy that seems somewhat counterintuitive. Athletes don't spend very much time training and practicing psychological skills. So really, when you think about your own experience in sports, whether you're still competing now or whether you were competing, you know, in the past, if you can reflect on that, think about how much time you spent training physically. If your experiences were like mine, then you might say, well, wow, we pretty much spent 100% or 99% of the time physically training, running through plays, conditioning, making sure we knew how to perform skills and we practiced them. Just lots of repetition and things like that. We spent very little time practicing psychological skills, and I think that's fairly common among most athletes. So why don't athletes use PST more often? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. The first thing is I think that there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of comfort. So people are uncomfortable teaching mental skills. And this particularly relates to coaches. So I don't think that coaches are that comfortable teaching mental skills. They might say, my coaches, for example, in most sports told us you should take a minute before the game to settle your mind, to be quiet. And so they gave us maybe 30 seconds or a full minute or 2 minutes, whatever, of just personal quiet time. And we did this as a team. But I don't remember them ever saying, we're going to go through a routine because that's important for your mental skills. I don't remember them ever saying, we're going to really spend time using imagery or visualization. So I'm interested in how your coaches taught you mental skills. Maybe they were better than mine. Sometimes coaches are. And a lot of that comes from this idea of just being comfortable with teaching those skills. A lot of times we see people that are not educated about psychological skills, and they think that there's no way to actually learn the skills, that it's just something you're born with. Either you're mentally tough or you're not. Either you're able to cope with pressure well or you're not. Some people might say, well, I'm just not good at visualization, or I'm not good at focusing or concentrating in pressure situations or in any competition. And really what they're saying is either I haven't had the training or I haven't put in the time to do it on a regular basis. And so it feels different to me. It feels uncomfortable, and I haven't been able to do it as I would have hoped. Another reason why athletes and coaches don't suggest that psychological skills training should be used more often is a lack of time. So typically this boils down to the coach really feeling like they need to put all of their time into just being prepared physically. So we're not talking necessarily about knowing the game plan or knowing the analysis. We're talking about really sitting down and going through a set of skills that will train the athletes to do well. So when I speak about lack of time, I'm talking mostly about just feeling like there's tons of pressure to try and teach skills and make sure that that's really the priority is performance. And I think that's an interesting excuse for not using psychological skills training, because a lot of what goes on when you think about sports really happens between your ears, right up in your head. And so if you take time to train your mind and to learn skills that you can use, then you're going to be much more successful. So there's kind of this disproportionate amount of time versus time that we spend practicing versus time that we probably use our psyche or our mind during competition. Sometimes people are just sucked into some psychological training myths. So one myth that you might encounter is that psychological training is, psychological skill training is just for problem athletes. So it might be that they believe that only if people have psychological or clinical problems, then they need to go talk to the sports psychology consultant. They also might just think that it's only if you're in a slump that you should go see a sports psychologist. But really, the way that I see psychological skills training is that it's a matter of wanting to start where I'm at and take a leap ahead and above everyone by putting in extra time to enhance my performance. Another myth that we see is that psychological skills training is only for elite athletes. And this is really interesting because we're starting to see more and more psychological skill training with athletes who are not at that elite level. And this might be athletes who are at the high school level or even at the youth sport level. And sometimes we even see, we're starting to see research on conducting psychological skills training with athletes who have intellectual or physical disabilities. So when we're talking about psychological skills training, you might think, oh, well, this is not something that applies to me because I'm not an elite athlete, or I'm not competing right now for anything. But I think the beauty of psychological skills training is that you can use it in a ton of different areas of your life, not just in sport. You could use it for test taking. You could use it before giving a presentation or a speech. You could use it in any situation where you're anxious. Maybe you're going out on a first date with someone you really like, or maybe you're preparing to ask them on a date. All of those things are situations where you might feel anxious. And so it's important to recognize that while we're talking primarily about sport in this class, these are things that you can use right now in your life. So yeah, one of the myths is that it's for elite athletes only. Psychological skills training does not just come quickly. One of the myths is that you have to, that it provides a quick fix to a problem. So for instance, I had a coach call me and say, hey, we're getting ready to go play and compete in this really high stakes competition. I think it was a championship game of some sort. And they said, can you come talk to my athletes? And I said, sure. And I was kind and nice about it. But really, I wasn't very hopeful because I know that just one meeting is not going to be enough. Like I said, this is a skill training process. So I'm going to keep harping on this. I'm going to keep going back to this. It's a skill training. It's not just a magic pill that you give to somebody and then they are all of a sudden better. And the final myth is that psychological skills training is not useful. And this is actually completely false. But a lot of people still hold this idea in their mind that it's not going to do me any good, it's not going to help. But these are skills that have been researched. There's tons of support for them. And it really boils down to whether or not the athletes feel like they're going to put in the time and whether or not they're communicating well with their consultant, the sports psychologist that they're working with. So when people say it's not useful, they might say that for a variety of reasons, but one of them is often that they haven't put in the effort to do it for an extended period of time. So as we move into the psychological skills that we'll be talking about over the next several chapters, actually for quite a few weeks as we go through different skills. I want you to recognize that there are some important keys. First of all, it's important to have realistic expectations. So if you were to talk to someone and tell them about sports psychology, and they're kind of an average Joe, and maybe a student here at Chico who isn't on the college team, but you tell them, oh yeah, if you just do this psychological skill training, you can make it to the professional level. That's a little bit overly enthusiastic about this. While I do think that it's valuable for everybody and you're going to see enhances in performance when you use these skills, then I do know that there are limits. It's not like you're going to take someone who's at a huge deficit as far as skill goes physically and turn them into a professional person. So it's not a magical elixir. It's not something you can drink or take a pill for and automatically it's going to make you better. So realistic expectations are great. And then again, like I already said, these psychological skills can be learned. So it's not something that you're just born with or you're not born with, but they also need to be practiced and integrated into your daily routine. All right, so as we're moving forward, I want to just give you kind of some basic understanding of the research that has been done about psychological skills training. And there is a lot of research out there. But most research on elite athletes shows that the most successful athletes differ from less successful athletes in one of the following ways. So one, they may have higher confidence, or they may have greater self-regulation of arousal. They may have better communication skills. They may have more positive thoughts and images go through their mind, and they have more determination or commitment. So if we go back, I'm going to go back a few slides. Excuse me for taking you through that quickly. When we come back to this question of what sets these athletes, these people who are the top pros in their respective sports, what sets them apart from other athletes, we can look at some of these different things that we just talked about. So it may be that there's a higher self-confidence that makes them better. They're more able to regulate their anxiety and their arousal. So they have some kind of coping mechanism or a means of handling the pressure that they feel. So let's go back here. So for example, when something negative happens to one of those athletes that I showed you on one of the first slides there, they might have a way to react that's more positive than an athlete who isn't as successful. So keep in mind, the key take home of this slide is just that elite athletes are, when you just look at that kind of sliver of the athletic population, elite athletes, most successful athletes are different from less successful athletes based on these 5 things that are on the slide. And that it's also important to just know that there are differences, and the ways that they differ are psychological. They may have the same exact talent, but they don't exactly have the psychological skills to back that up. So we're gonna, I want to mention this now as I introduce this idea of psychological skills training, but I also want you to keep it in mind when we talk about skills. These are the 5 cardinal skills, the 5 basic skills that you should be learning about in sports psychology. So the first is going to be arousal regulation. This typically has something to do with breathing, relaxation, different techniques to deal with anxiety, like we just talked about in chapter 4. It might also, one of the other skills is focus. So being able to push out distractors. This is sometimes called concentration. And attentional regulation, and we briefly again talked about that. We'll get into that later on in the semester. Imagery is another big one. Having positive self-talk is another skill that people learn, and then getting into a mental routine. So not just a physical, but a mental routine as well. So at this point, I want to show you, I'm going to keep sharing my screen with you. I want to show you a video about Evan Longoria, who is a baseball player for the Tampa Bay Rays. And he is, his story, his backstory is interesting. And so it talks a little bit about that. But he's one of the few athletes who at an elite level who's actually comfortable and open to talking about his use of sports psychology and how that has influenced him. So as we watch this video, take a few notes, and I'd like you to try and identify where he uses these 5 cardinal skills, or maybe instances in how he uses them. So let me pull up that video for you. So I gotta go through all my folders. I know what's in here. All right, here we are.
All right, everyone, let's get it going. Jeremy, yeah. The guy 16 months ago had never played in the major leagues, but now he's been elected to 2 All-Star teams, won the Rookie of the Year award in the American League unanimously, and many people in baseball are saying that he has the potential to be the best ever at his position.
Where was he a year and a half ago?
That's the thing that makes Evan Longoria in a lot of ways so special. I mean, he really did come out of nowhere in a sense. Not only was he not drafted out of high school, not only was he not recruited by a single Division I baseball program, he was barely recruited by Division III, which doesn't award scholarships.
What changed for him?
Well, he'll tell you the most important thing that changed for him was his mental maturation.
Walk slow to the plate. Remember your breathing.
Well, there's a drive. He's got the left field line.
Stick with the approach. Keep the routine going.
Takes that one to left field. That is deep. Way back.
Get into the game. Don't worry about the results.
He's to left field. How far is this one going to go? Evan Longoria with a monster blast. What goes on in the mind of Tampa Bay Rays third baseman Evan Longoria has helped him emerge as one of the game's highest profile young stars. The focus, the sense of calm, the faith in process, they're all essential components of his makeup.
Everybody says the same thing to me. They watch him go up to the plate, holds the bat like he's sleeping, until he explodes at the ball.
Evan Longoria drives to first base in the right center field. And he's to the ball. Across the right track, a home run. At the age of 23, Longoria is already a 2-time All-Star. His highly developed mental approach to the game, not to mention his willingness to discuss it, distinguishes him from his peers. It also gives him an edge.
To us, it looks like it just happens naturally, but there is a method. His ability to be in the present moment makes him one of the best. When the pitch is being thrown, he's already forgotten about last at bat, and all that exists is this particular pitch, and this particular pitch is coming to me right now.
I see a lot of guys who have a lot of physical ability, but don't have enough up top to, be able to control certain situations, or, some guys don't really buy into the whole mental training side of baseball, I guess. But for me, I've been doing it for so long that it's something that I trust.
Longoria has been doing it for 5 years. Before then, there was no reason to believe he'd develop into a major leaguer. In 2003, when he graduated from high school, 1,480 players were selected in the baseball draft. He wasn't one of them, nor was he recruited to play Division I college baseball.
Did you deserve to be overlooked when you were coming out of high school?
Definitely. Yeah, I wasn't good. I mean, I knew the game. I enjoyed playing the game. As far as ability and talent, I wasn't a professional player at that time.
To continue to play the game, Longoria enrolled at Rio Hondo, a junior college just a few miles from his hometown in Southern California. After hitting .430, Longoria transferred to Division I Long Beach State. There, he was introduced to the theories of Ken Ravizza, a professor of kinesiology and author of several books on sports psychology.
The essence is the idea of learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable and having something to go to when the garbage hits the fan, because the garbage will hit the fan, and let's be ready for it.
More than anything else, Ravizza preaches the gospel of mental preparation and structure. He teaches players to recognize failure as an unavoidable part of the game and how not to dwell on it. In the last 2 decades, he's been a paid advisor to several college and major league teams. At Long Beach State, his most apt pupils included Longoria and his teammate Troy Tulowitzki, now in his 3rd season with the Colorado Rockies.
Ken Ravizza, he's done a lot of good things for me, and it's all about relaxing, taking your breath, and just making sure that the game's not moving too quick.
When you first were exposed to Ken's teachings, even you said, come on, this stuff can't really work. What was the turning point, you think?
We started playing in a lot of stadiums where it was a packed house, or the pressure was on, and that's when I started to realize when the game becomes more of a mental grind, I needed something to go to.
How do you think those theories helped him? I think it calmed him. I think the mental game really helped him, and how he was way balanced after bad at-bats or bad games.
Oh, come on, you guys turn it over like that.
As Longoria matured physically, his mental training allowed him to maximize his talents. He emerged as a top prospect in the summer of 2005 when he was named MVP of the Cape Cod League, a traditional breeding ground for high draft picks. In the 2006 draft, 3 years after failing to be selected at all, Longoria was the 3rd overall pick.
The Tampa Bay Devil Rays select Evan.
How did he get so much better so quickly?
I think his openness, that it didn't come easy, that he went through the rejection, and he was willing to take the risk to grow versus playing it safe all the time.
Longoria's mental maturity helped convince the Rays that he could be the cornerstone of the franchise. Just 6 games into his major league career, they signed him to a 9-year contract worth up to $44.5 million. Coincidentally, Longoria had found another true believer in Rays manager Joe Maddon, a longtime proponent of the Ravizza method.
What Ken does is it's an attempt to make you think in a different or more clear way, controlling the controllable aspects of playing this game. Every time I see Evan, it's hello, and what do you got for me today, Ken? When you're putting on the batting gloves, put on the batting gloves. Step into the box, be in the box, be where you need to be when you need to be there.
Swing and rocking it into left center field. That's going to roll all the way to the warning track. There is a zen-like quality to Longoria's focusing techniques.
Ken talks a lot about the focal point. If I make an error in the field, or if I swing at a pitch in the dirt at the plate, and I really feel like, I've lost control of either my emotions or the at bat, that's when I step out. I always look at the left field foul pole, at the top of the left field foul pole.
Wherever you are,
just because I know there's always going to be a top of the left field foul pole. So,
and it works for you.
It works for me.
Even when he's not in the lineup, Longoria follows a mental routine. He'll slide on his batting gloves and imagine himself in bat. When he is playing, rituals help him relax and focus.
But let's say, for example, here comes his pitch. He fouls it off. He will step out of the box. He'll undo his gloves, release that pitch, rips the gloves back on, steps in the box, and he's back.
Where do you draw the line between what you think is superstition, what is habit, and what is really about focusing?
There are so many weird things that us baseball players do that may be classified all as superstition. But, I think superstition would be, if my mind was all messed up when I got to the plate if I didn't do that.
And it's not that.
No, it's not that at all.
Not everyone attributes Longoria's success to his mental focus. There's his work ethic, his bat speed, and another undeniable factor. Your buddies out in California that we spoke to said that they thought it was actually a big moment in your career and development when Eva Longoria became famous.
It seemed like everywhere I went, that was the only thing I heard for 2.5, 3 years now. But it kind of got my name out there. Whether it was Eva or Evan, obviously they remember the last name.
What I understand, last year she got you a bottle of champagne when you made the All-Star team. What did she get you this year?
Nah, she gave up. She gave up on me.
In the 2008 World Series, the chant "Eva, Eva" floated through the air in Philadelphia. Whether or not the taunting bothered him, Evan Longoria went 1 for 20 against the Phillies.
It could have been the pressure that I was putting on myself. It could have been the outside distractions that I let get to me, and I look back now and kind of kick myself in the butt for that. Things kind of sped up on me. I think that was part of the whole experience for me too. It's just learning those feelings.
He gets upset, but he's got some tools that he uses, and he knows that's part of the game. And then this goes back to his background where it didn't come easy. He had to struggle at times.
From undrafted and unrecruited to the All-Star game and the World Series, it's been a quick trip for Evan Longoria. Now comes the hard part, maintaining focus. Do you think there will be a day when you don't need a focal point? You don't need mental exercises that you do?
No, I don't think there will be, because as soon as you start believing that in this game, you'll get humbled in a heartbeat. I'll always have that to kind of keep in the back of my mind, and when I need it, use it. Get rid of those negative thoughts. Get back to the moment. Prepare to get a hit.
Okay, so I hope you were able to hear that and listen to it. If not, then someone let me know and I will post that video online and you can take a look at it again. So in what ways did Evan Longoria use the 5 cardinal skills? This is a point in the lecture where I wish we were together and I could ask you to come up with some ways that you felt like you saw him doing these things. And even from your basic understanding, you might come up with some of the deep breaths that he took. It showed him a lot, just taking a deep breath before batting, after batting, and I think that was important for him. He also talked about his focal point of the top of the left field foul pole. And just to be clear, I don't want you to understand that there is something magical about the top of the left field foul pole. It's simply a point for him to train his mind to refocus. And we'll talk more about that when we get to focus and concentration as the skill. It also showed him going through routines. And one of his routines is if he swings at a pitch in the dirt, or if he's unable to kind of take control of his emotions while he's at bat, then he'll step out of the batter's box, he'll undo his batter's gloves, and then he'll come back after he redoes them. And that's kind of a symbol for him, of how he is going to release the pitch, forget it, and now I'm starting over. I'm going back in with a fresh at bat mentally. That way, the previous pitch doesn't affect the next pitch. It showed a lot of video of him just talking to himself, kind of the Hollywood version, if you will. It was his voice, and they just showed pictures of him thinking. So it wasn't exactly what he was thinking, but it was examples of what he might be thinking, and that's sometimes called self-talk. And then he also used some imagery. You saw him standing in the dugout and they said when he's not in a game, then he'll go through the routine. Some of that is imagery. He'll imagine that he is actually going up to bat and doing it even though he's not there. All right, so who should implement these skills? Really, it should be someone who has some training in this area, first of all, and we'll typically say a certified sports psychologist, and that certification typically comes through ASP. However, there's some concern and a little bit of debate going on about the certification. Is it valuable? Do people know enough? Do the general public know enough about it to make it something that is really valuable to have? So for instance, when people say, hey, Evan Longoria needs a little bit of help with the sports psychology aspect of things, do they know that being a certified consultant is really crucial to getting the appropriate and proper training? And I think right now the answer is no. A lot of the public do not know what a certified sports psychology consultant is. However, you can find a list of these in a variety of places. There's, if you're looking more on the clinical side, the APA website has a list there of Division 47, which is the Sport and Exercise Psychology Division. There's also a list of certified consultants through ASP, which is on the Applied Sports Psychology website. And then if you're looking for the U.S. Olympic Committee registry, the people who work with the Olympic Committee will have that list as well. I want to encourage you, if you're interested in sports psychology, if it's something that you are really interested in, to join the Sports Psych listserv, which is run through Temple University. And pretty much what a listserv is it's an email list, and you're just pretty much on a group email. And anytime someone has a valuable comment or discussion point, or they're needing help with finding a consultant for an athlete, then they're going to post on the listserv, and it goes out to the entire list. And so there's probably upwards of 500 people who are registered for this, maybe more. I'm not exactly sure, but I put directions here on this PowerPoint in case you're interested. And it's something that you can go in and you can unsubscribe later on if you don't like it. But there's some interesting discussions that go on, and it'll really give you a feel for the sports psychology world in general. All right, we're just going to do a couple more slides here. The effectiveness of psychological skills training is typically, like we talked about previously, it's based on systematic and consistent practice. And so it's going to mostly stem from this idea of education. It really is just education about the skills and helping people enhance their performance using these skills. So the interventions, when I say intervention, I mean the particular way that someone is trying to make a change in their performance. It has to be, or you could substitute in there for intervention, the psychological skills training must be individualized. It has to be specific to an individual. So it's not a one size fits all type thing. Based on their personality, based on who they are, based on their family background, their experience level, all of these things have to be taken into consideration. It also needs to be systematic, which just means consistent. There has to be a specific order, building. Think of building blocks. That's kind of what systematic is. And it should be multimodal. So when we say multimodal, we're talking about using a variety of different methods. If you just stick with one method, it might, it may work, you may get lucky, but it also might not work. And so it's important to have different modes of how you're going to deal with that. There are 3 phases of psychological skills training. There's typically an education phase. This deals with really helping the athlete to understand the importance and the development phase, or the kind of importance of psychological skills training. It also is an important piece in helping them know what, where they're at right now, and are they using some of these skills, or have they been aware of how their mind is affecting their performance? Kind of like the exercise we did in the reflection. It may or may not have taken you a while to go through and really understand that, yeah, the mind does play a huge role in how that happens. Then there might be an acquisition phase, which focuses on strategies and techniques. So this is where this actual skills would be taught. And an individualized program would be created for that individual. And then the third phase is a practice phase. And this is where you really want to practice the skills enough to make them automatic. They're things that you know how to do immediately. It doesn't take a lot of thought. You can just go in and do what you need to do with that skill in order to increase your performance. So this is where you might start to integrate things actually into performance. You might do a lot of simulations and talk about what might happen in certain situations and how you can use these skills. All right, we're going to stop there. We will pick up with athletes are like onions when we get when I get back from my trip. So on October 20th, when we meet again. I just wanted to quickly go back to quickly go back here, stop my screen sharing and come back to me so you can see my face. So I hope that you were able to kind of jot down some notes during that time. I'll start out class on the 20th by asking if there are any questions about this lecture. If there's anything that you need me to answer and clarify, that would be the time to do it. So please make sure you read chapter 11 on psychological skills training. Please make sure that you have gone through the slides. I will post them shortly. I just remembered I haven't done that yet. And I will see you all when I get back, and I will have your exam scores posted, and I will also have your papers for you. So have a good week, and I will see you soon. Bye.